Peter is an introverted kid with no friends who is bullied at school. He lives with his parents, Mark and Carol. One night, while Peter is sleeping, he is awakened by a noise. He looks around the room, but doesn't find anything. Just as he's about to go back to sleep, he hears a loud noise coming from inside the wall. Startled, he jumps out of bed and turns on the light. He presses his ear against the wall to listen and knocks on it. Suddenly, he is terrified to receive a reply to his knocks. He goes to his mother and tells her about it, so she checks his room but she doesn't hear anything. She puts him back to bed and tells him that it's an old house and it's normal to have odd noises at night. The following day at school, the principal introduces a substitute teacher, Miss Devine, to the students. Peter has been constantly bullied by a kid named Brian, so he decides to stay in the classroom during recess. Miss Devine notices Peter's isolation and feels sympathy for him. She tells him he can help her decorate for Halloween and asks what he plans to dress up as, but he's not sure. Suddenly, a spider appears, startling Peter. Miss Devine then covers it with a glass and they release it outside. Back home during dinner, Peter mentions he wants to dress up and go trick-or-treating like the other kids. His parents refuse and reveal that several years before Peter was born, a girl from their neighborhood disappeared on Halloween night while she was out trick-or-treating. It was a traumatic event for everyone, and they don't want the same thing to happen to Peter. That night, while Peter is asleep, a strange bump appears on the wall. Just then, Peter hears the noise again, but this time, a girl's voice calls his name. Peter screams and calls for his dad, but the voice asks him not to tell him. Mark comes in to check but doesn't hear any noise. He tells Peter it might be rats making the noises. The next day, Mark and Peter go to get some rat poison to deal with it, which Peter says smells like cinnamon. Later at school, Devine notices Peter has drawn a picture of himself scared in bed with the words "help me" and becomes concerned. She decides to visit Peter's house. Carol opens the door and learns the reason for the visit. She insists that it's only Peter's imagination and closes the door. She then questions Peter about why he is seeking help from strangers. Peter simply says it's just a scary drawing, but it was actually the voice asking for help. Later that night, Peter wakes up to the sound of a knock on the wall and hears the same voice calling his name. The voice says she is very lonely and offers to be his friend but will leave if he doesn't want one. Peter understands the feeling of loneliness and asks the voice to stay. The next day at school, Peter draws a pumpkin and names it Hector. Devine quietly mentions that it's her favorite one, but Brian overhears her and becomes very jealous. During recess, Brian pushes Peter to the ground and then stomps on Peter's pumpkin, crushing it. At night, the voice asks Peter why he is crying, and Peter tells her it's because Brian bullies him every day. The voice tells Peter that he needs to stand up for himself and make Brian afraid of him. The next day after school, Peter follows Brian and pushes him down the stairs, breaking his leg, which leaves Peter horrified. After this, Peter is expelled from school. At home, Mark scolds Peter, who explains that it was not his intention to harm Brian. Carol brings up Peter's drawing of a child asking for help, and Mark asks Peter why he would draw something like that. Peter yells out that he really did hear something. Mark decides that Peter is grounded and moves the refrigerator to reveal a door behind it. Peter is taken inside. Carol says they're doing this because they love him. Then his parents leave before locking him in the basement, where Peter discovers a chain leading to a pit covered by a grate and sees a creepy doll inside. Afterward, Devine writes her phone number on Peter's quiz and visits his house again to give the quiz to Carol. Mark shows up and invites her in. While offering her a cup of coffee, Devine notices he is bleeding. Mark explains it's from a loose nail while doing some remodeling. Mark mentions that Peter will be homeschooled, as Carol was a teacher before becoming a mother. Devine asks to see Peter to ensure he is all right, but Carol gets offended and snaps at her. Meanwhile, Peter overhears their argument and bangs on the door for help, but the noise of the washing machine drowns him out. At this point, Mark asks Devine to leave. As she is on her way out, the washing machine stops and she hears the banging noise. She questions Mark, who explains it's just the washing machine as it starts to work again. Devine senses the tension and quickly leaves. After the punishment period is over, Carol gives Peter a bath, and Mark asks Peter if he realizes what he did was wrong. Peter responds affirmatively and promises to stop telling lies and behave. That night, Peter knocks on the wall and the voice responds. He tells her that his parents locked him in the basement. She warns him that his parents are not what they seem. Peter wants to see her, but she says her appearance will scare him, as she has been in the wall for too long. Peter insists, so she instructs him to peel off the wallpaper to reveal a hole behind it. Peter looks into the hole, and suddenly, an eye appears, startling him. She then reveals that she is his sister, Sarah, who has been locked away by their parents and managed to claw her way to him. She's been waiting for Peter to grow big enough to move the clock that hides the door so she can escape. As they talk every night, the voice starts to affect him. Sarah convinces Peter that their parents are evil, as they plan to imprison him in the walls after killing her. Although Peter doesn't believe their parents would kill anyone, Sarah insists they already have and asks him to see what's buried in the garden. In the garden, Peter starts digging where Sarah told him. He is shocked to find a skull. Just then, Carol spots Peter from the window. Peter quickly buries the skull before Carol can find him and pretends he was just looking for a pumpkin to carve for Halloween. Later, Sarah tells him that it was Halloween before they locked her in the wall. The missing girl came for trick-or-treating, and when she saw Sarah calling for help, they killed her. Peter promises to get her out and run away together. He sneaks into his parents' room and calls Devine for help, but Carol finds him and angrily takes him back to his room, where she sees the peeled wallpaper and discovers the hole, terrifying her. She tells Peter that whatever happens now will be his fault. That night, Peter feels more threatened than ever. Sarah urges him to do something as they are going to kill them. Peter goes downstairs and overhears his parents arguing about the need to solve their problem once and for all. Suddenly, they spot him, and he quickly runs back to his room in fear. The next evening, which is Halloween, the family is having dinner when Mark notices the soup tastes different than usual. Carol denies making any changes, but then realizes it smells like cinnamon. Just then, Mark becomes alarmed and confronts Peter, demanding to know what he has done. Peter reveals that he knows they harmed his sister. Mark is horrified and realizes Peter has poisoned them with rat poison. He immediately asks Carol to call 911, but she rushes to the phone only to find the line has been cut. Suddenly, Mark begins vomiting black liquid and succumbs. Carol grabs a knife and chases Peter, managing to catch him, but she starts vomiting herself and Peter kicks his mother down the stairs. As he takes her keys, Carol warns him not to let her out, but Peter ignores her and goes to their room where Sarah instructs him to move the huge clock and unlock the door. Peter then realizes he has unleashed a monster and rushes back to his room, quickly locking the door behind him. Sarah tries to open the door and taunts him in a creepy voice, asking how he felt watching his parents die. At that moment, Brian and his cousins, all wearing Halloween masks, arrive at Peter's house seeking revenge. The door mysteriously opens and they enter the house, starting to wreck the place. In the kitchen, the bunny is shocked by what he sees while Brian slips and falls. At the same time, the cat finds its way to Peter's room and discovers him hiding under the bed, attempting to capture him. Meanwhile, after smashing the piano, the pig is about to leave when he hears a noise and notices hair sliding down the piano. As he approaches, Sarah grabs his legs and pulls him under the piano. He screams and dies. Hearing the scream, the others rush to investigate. Just then, Brian discovers Carol's body and hears another scream as the bunny tries to run away but is caught and dragged away by Sarah, who then attacks another one of the group and kills him. Brian is terrified as Sarah appears and kills him too. Sarah crawls toward Peter and reveals that their parents were horrified by her appearance when she was born, so they locked her away in a cage. She was forced to live with cobwebs and rats in the dark. Ever since Peter was born, Sarah has resented him for being able to live a normal life, while she learned how to climb and manipulate him. Suddenly, she reveals a pumpkin with a head in it, terrifying Peter. She then takes him and locks him away. Afterward, Devine arrives at Peter's house where she discovers the mess. As she tries to call 911, she hears a noise and sees Sarah's hair. Suddenly, Sarah scratches her leg, causing her to fall. Devine is terrified as she sees Sarah approaching. Devine grabs a fire poker and tries to escape, only to find the door is locked. Just then, she hears Peter screaming at her to run away. Devine rushes upstairs to find Peter. She hears Sarah approaching and quickly closes the door. She then manages to break through the wall to rescue Peter. They grab the keys and rush to escape. Unfortunately, Sarah catches Peter. Sometime later, Peter wakes up to find himself in the pit. Sarah emerges and crawls towards him. He sees her face and asks her why she is like that. Sarah reveals that she was born this way and no one likes a monster. Just then, Devine calls out for Peter, who responds before Sarah can cover his mouth. Devine follows his voice to the basement, where Sarah emerges from the pit and attacks her. As Sarah is about to kill Devine, Peter grabs her long hair and pulls her back. He manages to climb out of the pit, and Devine hits Sarah with the fire poker repeatedly until she falls back into the pit. Peter quickly closes and locks the lid before Sarah can climb out. As they leave, Sarah pleads with Peter in a girl's voice, but Peter refuses. Sarah then threatens him, saying she will eventually escape and haunt him for the rest of his life.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our channel for more videos.